So every year the union budget comes out, right? And it can feel, well, a little overwhelming. A flood of huge numbers, complicated jargon, it's easy to get lost. But here's the thing. What does any of it actually mean for you, for your family, for your future plans? Well, that's what we're here to figure out. Let's get into Budget 2026 and break down what it means for your life.
All right, let's get straight to it. We're going to focus on the connection between this huge national plan and your wallet. Because let's be honest, at the end of the day, that's the bottom line for most of us, isn't it?
This is really the big question we're all asking. Are my taxes going up or down? Is getting a loan going to be any easier this year? Will that trip I've been planning get any cheaper? So stick with me, and we're going to connect all those high-level government announcements directly to your everyday life.
Okay, so just a quick refresher. What exactly is the union budget? Think of it like a massive household budget for the whole country. It's the government's annual financial statement presented by the finance minister. It basically lays out two things: where the money is coming from, mostly our taxes, and where it's all going to be spent. Everything from new highways and railways to healthcare and defense. Simple as that.
Now, before we dive into all the details, let's zoom out for a second. Every budget has a big picture vision, a North Star it's aiming for. And this year, that vision is all about building towards Vikasit Bharat, which is the long-term goal of making India a developed nation by 2047.
And to guide this vision, the finance minister laid out three core duties, or as she called them, kartavyas. These three principles are pretty much the roadmap for this entire budget. They tell us exactly what the government is prioritizing and what's driving all the big financial decisions.
So what are these three duties? Well, let's break them down. Number 1, keep the economic engine running strong and steady. Number 2, help people, fulfill their aspirations. And number 3, make sure that progress and resources reach absolutely everyone. The whole Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas idea? This three-pronged approach, that's really the bedrock of this whole budget.
Okay, that's the big vision. But how does that translate into actual action, into real policies? Let's get into the nitty-gritty and look at the key announcements that you're really going to feel.
First up, the one everyone's waiting for, income tax. So the big news here is, well, no big news. The income tax slabs are staying exactly the same as last year. It seems the focus this time around is less on big tax cuts and more on just cleaning up and simplifying the system.
But there's some really good news on the tax front, especially if you're planning an international trip or have expenses abroad. The government has seriously cut the tax collected at source, or TCS. So what does that mean? For foreign tour packages, the rate plummets from a hefty 20% all the way down to just 2%. And if you're sending money overseas for education or medical needs, that rate also drops from 5% to 2%. This is a huge relief, and it means a lot less of your money is tied up in upfront taxes.
Now, let's talk about the headline number of this budget, a truly massive 12.2 lakh crore rupees set aside for what's called capital expenditure, or CapEx. And honestly, this is a huge deal. Think of CapEx as the government's investment in building stuff for the long term, assets like roads, ports, and railways. The thinking here is simple. When the government spends big on infrastructure, it doesn't just build a new highway. It creates tons of jobs, drives up demand for materials like steel and cement, and it also gives private companies the confidence to invest right alongside it.
So where's all that money actually going? Well, a huge chunk is fueling a massive infrastructure push. We're talking about 7 brand new high-speed rail corridors connecting major cities like Mumbai, Pune, and Delhi, Varanasi. There are also new corridors for rare earth minerals, which are totally essential for all our tech gadgets. And speaking of tech, there's a huge push with India's Semiconductor Mission 2.0 to bring more chip manufacturing to India. On top of that, you've got money for medical innovation and even a long-term tax holiday for data centers to really pull in global investment.
But it's not all about giant infrastructure projects. The budget is also looking at the smaller players. There's a new 10,000 crore rupee fund specifically for small and medium businesses, SMEs. The whole idea is to give them the equity support they need to scale up, to expand, and most importantly, to create what the government is calling future jobs champions.
Okay, so we've seen the big numbers and the major policies. But let's bring it back down to earth. How does all of this actually come together and affect real people in their day-to-day lives? Let's connect those dots right now.
All right, let's break it down by who you are. If you're a salaried employee, the most direct win is that lower upfront tax on international travel. Planning a trip just got a bit easier on the wallet. Now, if you're a small business owner, that new SME fund we talked about, that could mean easier access to the money you need to grow and hire more people. For farmers, there's a push towards high-value crops like coconut and cashew, which could lead to better income. What about students and young people? Well, you get that reduced tax on foreign education fees, plus a major focus on creating those future-ready tech jobs. And for women entrepreneurs, there's a new She-Mark initiative designed to help them get access to credit-linked products to build their businesses.
Okay, so how does all of this compare to last year's budget? It's always a good idea to see what's changed and what stayed the same, because that really tells you where the government's priorities are shifting.
So on one hand, we're seeing some familiar themes. That huge spending on infrastructure, that's still front and center. Same with the big Make in India manufacturing push. But what's new this year is how laser-focused the priorities have become. We're hearing a lot about very specific things like high-speed rail, semiconductors, and rare earth minerals. And maybe the biggest shift in approach is this. Instead of broad tax cuts for everyone like last year, the focus is now on very targeted fixes and just cleaning up the system.
All right, let's pull this all together. It's time to look at the expert view and figure out the key takeaways. What are the big strengths? What are the potential concerns? And what should you really remember from all of this?
So if we look at this with a balanced view, here's what we see. On the plus side, there's a really strong, clear focus on long-term growth through that big infrastructure spend. The government is also being careful with its money. It's maintaining what's called fiscal stability, aiming for a deficit target of 4.3%. That just means they're trying to limit how much they have to borrow. Now, for the possible concerns, the biggest one is always implementation. Having a great plan is one thing, but making it happen on the ground is the real challenge. And since there weren't any big tax cuts, a lot of experts are going to be watching very closely to see what happens with consumer spending.
Okay, if you're going to remember just 3 things from everything we've talked about, let it be these. First, this budget is all about building for tomorrow. That massive 12.2 lakh crore investment in infrastructure is the #1 story. Second, relief is targeted. The government focused on specific fixes, like that TCS change, instead of broad changes to income tax slabs. And third, it's about future-proofing the economy. There are some really big bets being placed on high-tech areas like semiconductors, AI, and biopharma.
So when you look at the whole picture, Budget 2026 is really trying to strike a balance between pushing for growth, maintaining stability, and getting the country ready for the future. It's a strategic plan that seems to favor long-term strength over a short-term boost.
And that really leaves us with one big question to think about. With this clear, heavy focus on long-term infrastructure and technology, is this the blueprint that truly puts India on a solid path to achieving that ambitious vision for 2047?